You always must be wondering, where do all these taxes that I pay go? Why is the country so poor even if there are so many rich people and so much tax collected by the government? Why don't we see so much development every year? All these questions can be answered in this one document released by the government every year. Let me present to you the annual fiscal budget. Before we get into the nitty-gritties of what this year's budget objectivizes, what is this year's budget, what are the contents of this year's budget, let's look at what actually budget is. An annual budget is the document released by the government that states the projected income that the government expects to earn and the projected or the planned expenditures that the government expects to make in one fiscal year. For us, a fiscal year refers to starting from 1st of Shravan and ending to 31st of Asar. The annual budget is disclosed by the finance minister in a budgetary speech done in front of the Nepalese parliament and the whole public. It is usually done in the month of Jade. Like this time, it was done by our Honorable Finance Minister, Mr. Janardhan Sharma. Let's look at how this year's budget really looks like. Like for any budget, it is very essential for the annual fiscal budget to outlay what the objectives of the budget are. What does it want to eradicate? What does it want to solve? What does it want to implement? It must be clear in the objectives. Like for this year, the 2079-80 budget wants or shows implementation of certain amendments and provision that would increase the production in the economy, making Nepal economy a product-based economy. And at the same process, the amendments and provisions also want to create as many jobs as possible. The other objective of this year's budget is smooth and efficient transfer of funds to all level of governments, the local or provincial. The other objective of this year's budget is controlling the ever rising inflation of the country. And finally, making our country a balanced economy in terms of job, in terms of revenue, in terms of export, import. A balanced economy is a must for this year's budget. The annual fiscal budget allocated for this year is NPR 1793.83 billion. Out of the big chunk of money that the government expects to earn, the most amount of money is going to come from tax revenue. About 69.1% of the total income that the government expects is going to be from tax revenue, may it be income taxes, VAT, excise duty, import duty, etc. The second highest is the internal debt. Collection and repayments of internal debt will lead to 14.3% of the total revenue to be earned, followed by collection of foreign debt, that is 13.5%, and lastly, foreign grants from international organizations or foreign countries. It will lead to 3.1% of the total revenue that it expects to earn. In terms of expenditure, the budget expects to spend the most amount of money in current expenditures or its day-to-day daily expenses like providing wages and salaries and many other expenses that take place on daily basis. About 753.4 billion rupees will be spent on this area. Next being the capital expenditure where 380.38 billion rupees will be spent. These are expenditures on long-term assets and long-term plans that government plans to make. The infrastructure development that the country makes falls under these expenditures. The third would be provincial and local transfers. So the government would transfer about 429.83 billion rupees to provincial and local governments for their different spending needs. And finally, 230.22 billion rupees would be kept or spent for financial management of various transfers, payments, and various financial needs that the government would face in near future. The annual fiscal budget also tells us about our country through various indicators, some being inflation and growth rate. Inflation rate refers to that rate at which the prices levels of different goods keep rising, while growth rate refers to at what pace or what rate is the economy growing or pacing. In 2078-79, both these rates were quite stable at 6.5%. Though inflation was still high, it's expected to go higher to 7.3%, while the growth rate is expected to fall to 5.8%. The next indicator is the per capita income, or the income earned by each individual in a country. Even though the per capita income has risen significantly, but still, for a country of our size, it's quite modest. The major highlights of this year's budget starts off with a very good news for all government employees. The government employees' salaries are expected to increase by 15% this year. For our elderly people, the monthly old age allowances will only be provided after you attain the age of 68, not before. For our investors located at various countries outside Nepal, government has allocated quotas that whenever an IPO is launched, 10% of that IPO must be allocated for Nepalese investors who are located anywhere outside the world. Now, the word free or discount definitely charms everyone. Similarly, this year budget is ready to charm you. If you spend less than or if you use less than 20 units of electricity, you don't have to pay any electricity price or any electricity bills. Similarly, for industries, those who cross over 10 crores in electricity bills, you will be getting 2 to 15% discount on your bills depending on the terms and conditions. The major highlights of this year's budget stay strong by providing 40% tax deductions for 5 years if you're establishing an assembly line or production unit of electric vehicles in Nepal. To all those enthusiasts who want to trade in real estate, you will be needing official permission from an official body in Nepal. Without that, you will not be allowed to trade in any real estate properties. Now, maybe to increase the tax base or to increase more income tax, government has decided to issue PAN card while anyone is obtaining their citizenship ID or the national ID cards. For all the finance enthusiasts and equity lovers out there, government has decided from this year the private equity and venture capital format of business will be allowed to operate. Along with that, it has allocated more than 260 million rupees for incubation centers in Nepal. Now, the government has always prioritized the education sector. Likewise, this year more than 70 billion rupees alone is being expended in terms of bringing technical or digitalized solutions in education method to more than 1200 schools in Nepal. For healthcare sector, more than 69 billion rupees is being allocated with a mandate that healthcare institutions must give free health checkup once a year to anyone who has attained the age of more than 40. The government has also brought different schemes and mandates for its agriculture sector. With more than 55.9 billion rupees allocated in this sector, the government has brought the Kishan Pension Scheme, where any contribution that will be done by the farmers, 10% of that contribution will be done by the government. The government has also established rules for commercial banks to provide loans to agricultural industries. For any one branch located in a rural area, that one branch must give loans to at least 5 agro-based industries. The government can also be seen doing various development in its infrastructural sector. It has brought the Gautam Buddha International Stadium development under its responsibility, and also the expressway is being built between Chitwan, KTM, Kathmandu, Butwal, and Pokhara. A big news for the infrastructure development sector. Until now, we have seen what a budget is, what this year's budget looks like, what this year's budget's objectives are, and the major highlights for this year's budgets. But now we'll be looking at the major revenue sources for this year's budget. That is the various taxes that the government would collect, the various amendments that these taxes would have, and the various provision or exemption that these taxes hold. So let's move forward with various tax forms that government of Nepal collects. So starting off with some of the general taxes being imposed, the first tax is the health risk tax that usually the government imposes on items that are very harmful for anyone's health. Starting with BD, the health risk tax is at 30 paisa per stick. Khaini, surti, pan masala or gutka of any sorts would be 60 rupees per kilo, and for cigarettes and cigars, rupees 60 paisa per stick. Expanding the general taxes, the government will be imposing certain education service fee on anyone who is going abroad. 2% tax will be cut while exchanging of any foreign currency for purpose of studying abroad. Certain infrastructure development tax is also being imposed by the government, where rupees 10 per liter of petrol or diesel will be imposed whenever these items enter the country at the point of custom itself. The next category of tax is the income tax. It is basically the tax that you pay on the income you've earned. It is one of the biggest source of revenues for the government. The government collects it in two ways. First, once you've received the income, after receiving the income, you pay the government some tax. Second is through withholding taxes. You pay taxes at the point of payment itself. We can see this example at when you receive your salaries. Like whenever we receive our salary, certain amount of tax is already cut and the remaining amount is credited to our account. That is example of withholding taxes where the government cuts the tax at the point of payment itself. Now let's look at the various income tax that government imposes. Now every year the fiscal annual budget brings out certain amendments and rules that everyone have to follow. These rules might change the amount of tax rates that were previously something else. For income tax, the general tax rates for any entity is 25%, while for any financial institution or insurance company would be up to 30%. This year budget has increased the cooperative taxes for municipality to 7.5%, sub-municipality cooperatives to 10%, and cooperatives in metropolitan cities to 15%. Now, if you were to ask me what is the biggest change you've seen in the budget this year, it would definitely have to be the change in the income tax slab. The change has been brought after many years. Before that, the income tax slab is the set of guidelines that suggest for how much income we earn, how much tax we are supposed to pay. In Nepal, we've been following a progressive tax regime which suggests for higher amount of income we pay higher amount of taxes. In this year's regime, if we assess as an individual, the first tax slab will be at income level 5 lakh would be 1%, next 2 lakh would be 10%, next 3 lakh would be 20%, next 10 lakh would be 30%, and finally any balance exceeding 20 lakh rupees would be 36% tax. If we assess as a couple, the first tax slab would be at 6 lakh of income will be paying 1% tax. The next 2 lakh rupees would be 10% tax. For the next 3 lakh would be paying 20% tax. The next 9 lakh will be paying 30% tax, and the balance exceeding 20 lakh will be paying 36% tax. The tax slab that was brought this year is definitely good for the lower to middle income earning people. It has definitely increased the horizon of income by decreasing the amount of tax at the given level of income from 1 to 10 lakhs. Now, I think it is a mutual feeling when I say too much taxes. After all, who likes paying taxes at all? A major chunk of our income is taken away by the government. I don't think anyone here likes to pay taxes, but we will have to pay taxes. It is mandated by the government. If you're earning income in a certain country, you will have to pay taxes. But what if I say there are loopholes behind that? General legal loopholes. That is through tax exemptions. If we contribute to various funds, if we take or pay various premiums, if we take various insurance, we contribute to trust, we will be able to exempt taxes. We'll be able to decrease certain amount of money from our taxable income. This is where budget plays a big role. The annual fiscal budget also tells us about various tax exemptions that government is allowing, various amendments that has happened from previous tax exemptions to the current tax exemptions. Hence, following the budget for this use also is very essential. Keeping in mind some of the tax exemptions that are already there, some of the major amendments that has been done by the government would be for more than 5 years, 100% tax will be exempted for industries that are producing oxygen, sanitary pad, or vaccines in Nepal. After the 5 years, for the next 2 years, again 50% of taxes will be exempted. In terms of agriculture industry, if you're establishing an agriculture industry within the year 2082, for next 5 years you'll be getting 100% tax exemptions in income taxes. Also, for trading land and building, if you own the land and building for more than 5 years, the withholding taxes have been increased to 5%, while if you own the building or land for less than 5 years, the withholding tax rates have been increased to 7.5%. The next form of tax is a form of indirect tax that the government collects. It is the value added tax. As the name suggests, this tax is imposed on each value addition stage of any product or service. Let's say an example, a producer makes a product worth 100 rupees. Before selling it out with the profit margin, he will have to impose 13% tax on that product. Let's say the producer sells it to a retailer. The retailer then again has to impose more 13% on the already 13 rupees that he or she is paying. Finally, this tax is borne by the final consumer. Hence, the tax is imposed at each stage of value addition and finally is paid by the final consumer. The value added tax is one of the biggest revenue sources for government. With last year, it stood at one third of the revenue source for the government. The value added tax is very stable. It is set at 13% for any good or service. Now, talking about VAT threshold, there are certain limits up to which, if the company exceeds the sales, they'll have to get registered to VAT. So, if a business is selling goods and if its turnover is less than 5 million, it's not necessary for them to come to VAT. But if their sales is more than 5 million rupees, then they'll have to be registered to VAT and impose VAT on goods sold hereafter. If it's a company that is service based, its turnover limit is rupees 2 million. So if it sells more than 2 million rupees of revenue, then they'll have to convert to VAT and register to VAT. Henceforth, they will be adding VAT to every single bill they make. For companies that is a mixture of both goods and services, the 2 million turnover will be applicable, where if the turnover exceeds rupees 2 million, they'll have to be registered to VAT. Like income taxes, various exemptions can be there for value added tax as well. Just the difference is these are placed in two schedules, Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 of VAT, where various products and services are placed. And if any business is dealing in with those types of goods or service, they don't have to impose in taxes. Like basic necessity items or agricultural goods or trading of animals, these fall under Schedule 1, and any business dealing in with them will not have to impose taxes or value added tax specifically. Schedule 2 can be majorly highlighted by things such as anything that is going outside the country, exported outside the country, or made for building purposes. They don't have to pay any VAT, or they don't have to impose any VAT on the same. While the budget definitely has some amendments for these type of exemptions. Likely, for Schedule 1 this year, such an amendment can be seen where fish, dried, salted, or in brine, smoked, or basically anything that can be fit for human consumption, the exemption for these goods have been withdrawn, which means that now onwards, if any business is selling these goods, they will have to impose VAT and pay VAT on the same. While it can be seen to major highlights as well, tax incentives for establishing vaccine and liquid oxygen industries have been there. No VAT has to be paid by industries that are making liquid oxygen and vaccines within Nepal. Now, this brings to our next form of tax, that is excise duty. Excise duty is that tax that a manufacturer pays on goods that are manufactured within Nepal. Now you must be wondering, if the government wants a production based economy, why impose excise duty? Why increase the prices of the produced goods within Nepal? But there is a reason for that as well. Definitely, to earn revenue, that's always the prime motive. But the major reason for imposing excise duty is to control the types of goods that is being produced as well. So there are certain goods that are very essential. They can be high value in terms of exports. They can be of basic necessity, nature of basic necessities. For these type of goods, the excise duty is very low. In fact, the government exempts for most of it. But for those items that are completely not necessary, like cigarettes, alcohol, that can be very bad in nature, bad for health, bad for the economy, they impose very high excise duty on the same. So like income tax, excise duty too has its different slab. For different type of product, you'll have different tariffs, different rates. But in the budget, you will be seeing different amendments that will be made for the given tax slabs. Likewise, for this year, we can see different excise duty raised. For example, firstly, the electric vehicle industry is booming in Nepal. The government sees the exposure of electric vehicles and the chances the people are taking to bring in assembly lines and manufacture EVs. Hence comes the rule that the excise duty have been increased for the same. For electric vehicles with pickup of more than 100 to 200 kilowatt, the excise duty have been increased to 30% from 0%. For EVs with pickup of 201 to 300 kilowatt, the excise duty have been placed at 45% from again, which was 0% before. And finally, with pickup of more than 300 kilowatt, excise duty has been placed at 60% from what was again 0% before. Now, the next item here has been consecutively seen in almost every budget. The excise duties have been raised on various type of beer, alcohol, cigarettes, tobacco, etc. Again, this year, excise duty can be seen increased for various non-essential items or deemed as luxury items like nuts, juices, toys, and beauty items, whether made inside the country or imported from outside the country. Now, there's certain thing about excise duty. So, whenever a producer pays the excise duty, the producer sticks a sticker on the goods that has been paid for excise duty. So, if you watch or if you see any cigarette boxes or alcohol bottles, you'll find a sticker with logo of the government as well. That indicates that this product has paid excise duty. Now, in the budget, there are certain rules that have been mentioned that if the excise duty officer, when an inspection finds that producer does not have enough excise duty stickers compared to the product that it has produced, 100% excise duty can be imposed on the product there. While if he sees that there are more excise duty stickers, more than what they should have, they can pay a huge amount of excise duty or huge amount of fine summing up to even 1 lakh rupees. Now again, we in the beginning of the budget we saw during the major highlights as well that government has been focusing on industries like oxygen and vaccine productions. Likewise, excise duty will be exempted for this year for anyone producing vaccine or liquid oxygen in Nepal. Now, this brings to the final category of the government revenue from taxes, that is, the custom duties. So, the custom duty is that duty the government imposes on goods that enter the economy from outside. That is, any import of goods and service will have to pay custom duty and certain level of excise duty as well. How do they do it? The moment a good enters the border, the goods will be compared against a certain slab. So there's a tariff rate or tariff sheet where various goods are placed and taxes for the corresponding goods is written. So if the goods that is being imported falls under the same good, the given tax will be imposed. Now you must be wondering, why do government collect custom duties? Firstly, definitely to increase government revenue. But moreover, custom duty and excise duty are imposed on imported goods so as to bring produced goods within the country and the imported goods at the same level. So we know we have countries like China and India as our neighboring country with manufacturing capacity of a huge level. Right now, Nepal is not at par with the manufacturing capacity or capability of these countries, and these countries can produce goods at very, very cheap rates. Now, if no duty was imposed on these goods, the prices of local goods would be very expensive and no one would buy local goods, hence diminishing production. Hence comes custom duty to bring goods at the same level. Other reason would be to maintain our balance of payment. So we know that due to high level of imports, we are suffering in the terms of balance of payments. We always have a negative balance of payment as we have very less exports while very high imports. By imposing high custom duties on those items that are completely non-essential or considered as luxury, like car, vehicles, or any other luxury items like mobile phones. These items are imposed with heavy custom duty so as to decrease the imports of such items that would not affect the economy. So when it comes to the budget, the annual budget shows us the various tariff rates that the government would impose on various goods being imported in the country. At the same time, various amendments and highlights within custom duty can also be seen in the budget. Like this year, it started off with increment in excise duty for import of beer, alcohol, or cigarettes. Exemption of up to 90% has been placed on import of sanitary pads, while 1% exemption has been placed on import of raw material that manufactures sanitary pads. We can see exemption of up to 25% of custom duty and 50% of excise duty on import of raw material that would manufacture four-wheeler vehicles within Nepal. And within the vehicle segment itself, exemption of up to 75 custom duty can be seen on import of maximum of two school buses by a business can be seen, while exemption of 1% on import of raw materials for manufacturing rickshaws and bikes can also be seen. Finally, something that has been added to this year's budget is tax amnesty scheme. The government has been seeing that many companies are not paying the taxes on time or they have not filed the taxes since long period of time. To increase the motivation to pay these taxes, these bad debts for the government, as they can be said, tax amnesty schemes have been developed. In the budget, we can see various discounts, various waivers, various interest being cancelled, various fines being cancelled, taxes being lowered, so as to people who have not paid their previous taxes for like year 2075, 76, 77, they come and pay taxes now. It is an initiative by the government to increase their revenue and get back the income that has become a bad debt for them. To conclude it all, the Nepali 2079-80 budget has been a package in its own, bringing out objectives that is very essential for the economy, bringing out expenditures that would bring the economy scale to another level, and expectations of revenue that the government will have to collect anyhow. Now, there's a fine line between planning something and executing something, and we all know how ineffective the Nepalese government has been until now in the implementation phase of anything. So, with the hopes that this time, the beaming hope, the objectives that the government wants to fulfill, the targets that the government has will be fulfilled without any prejudice, without any corruption, and with full honesty and efficacy. This budget will be a beaming hope for the future and the future to come. With this, I would like to end my take on Nepali budget 2079-80. I hope it has been a big help to you all. Thank you. It has been an amazing experience.